All right, guys, so in this next section, I really want to focus in on number two, that the Christian idea of God is lame or it sucks. And as Henderson writes, he seems to try to make 2 points. Number one, that the biblical idea of God, the biblical God, doesn't either love well or he doesn't do the whole justice thing well. Okay, and I think this is really, really important. And outside of mint chocolate chip ice cream, this is one of my favorite things on the planet to think or talk about. All right, so here we're talking about evil here. Now, Henderson doesn't actually say what evil is, and that I think is a problem. He simply suggests certain behaviors of what people should do. Now, what I think we should do is we should first diagnose the problem before we offer a prescription. So we should figure out what evil is, and then what we, or God, or the flying spaghetti monster, should do about it. So what do we do about evil? How do we diagnose it? I'd say that we've got 3 options. First option about what is evil is, let's take Buddha or Thanos. Both of them would say that evil is a necessary balance to the good that's in the world. The other option is that the universe is an accident and morality is purely survival of the fittest. So whatever happens, the universe is just weeding out the weak, so you should just pick up your big girl panties and survive. Notice in the second option that the universe is an accident. If it's an accident, I cannot say that the universe should be a certain way. That's kind of the definition of an accident. So what about this definition for evil? That will grow out of my third option here. What about evil is just something that ain't how it should be? If the universe was created to be a certain way, then we could say that the universe should be like something. If the Creator God made us to love Him and to love the other people and things that He made, then we could simply say that evil is whenever one of those ain't happening. What makes this seem even more difficult is that we got multiple flavors of evil. And here's what I mean. We got fools killing each other all over the world for no good reason. And also, we've got this kind of natural evil where we have like floods and natural disasters and things that seem like they have no justification for. So at first glance, it really seems understandable why Henderson would say that whatever's running this universe, if it's a flying spaghetti monster or whatever, it seems like they either don't do justice well or they don't love well. Where does Henderson go? Well, the next thing that Henderson does is he makes the so important assumption that the universe is supposed to be a certain way, that the universe was not an accident. So from there, he gives the flying spaghetti monster fix. He recommends certain behaviors, and kind of like the 10 Commandments, he has the 8 I really rather you didn't. And so what I want to do is I want to look at the 8 I really rather you didn't versus the stuff that Jesus was all about. And I want to compare and contrast those things because there's some surprising overlap. But there's also some important differences where the stuff that Jesus described and talked about and lived out and all that good stuff, he kind of ties in and works that in to be consistent and coherent with how he diagnosed evil. Even though the flying spaghetti monster doesn't offer us a diagnosis on what evil is, Henderson still recommends some things that we should do. So let's check those out. Okay, so he says, don't act like you're better than other people. If some people don't believe in me, that's okay. Don't use religion to oppress people or to be mean. Don't challenge bad ideas of other people on an empty stomach. Eat first and then challenge their stupid ideas. Don't judge people for how they look. Man's a person, woman's a person, samey, unless we're talking about fashion. And obviously, women's got a whole lot better chance on that one. Last point I just want to bring up, it says don't spend a whole bunch of money on building these big old churches when you could spend that money on ending things like poverty, curing diseases, and lowering the cost of cable. So first thoughts. Henderson's not actually the first person to bring up some of these ideas. If you check out Matthew 5 through 7, Jesus said some of the same ideas, but a little bit more beautiful, more coherent way. Seriously, check it out. You might actually like this dude. take a quick moment to check out Jesus' greatest hits, also known as the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 through 7. All right, so that's where Jesus talks about, okay, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. So Jesus is not talking about oppressing people. So, yeah, cool. All right, a little bit lower. Chapter 6, he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. And so he's talking about the Pharisees there who love to be seen by people. They're like, ooh, look at me, I'm so holy, I'm so holy. Okay, so Jesus is not talking about oppressing people. He's not talking about impressing people. So I think that's kind of what Henderson would like to see. Now I want to think about the difficult topic of judging other people, because Henderson's inconsistent here. I want you to see this, okay? So it says, it's okay if people don't believe in me, in the flying spaghetti monster. Then he says to challenge the bad ideas of other people. So how are we supposed to handle this tension between, on the one hand, not trying to be an oppressive turd face, but on the other hand, still trying to work for what's true and good in the world, okay? And hopefully in your friends and neighbors and stuff. So let's check out Matthew chapter 7. Let's see what Jesus has to say. He says, judge not, that you not be judged. For with the judgment that you pronounce, you will be judged. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Okay, then he gives us the slow example right here. You can check out my lovely little drawing there. Why do you see the speck in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log that's in your own eye? How do you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your own eye, when there is the big old log in your own? You hypocrite, first take out the log out of your own eye, and you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Jesus was able to be consistent and coherent in the things that he said, and he was able to be consistently motivated by love. He recognizes that not all thoughts are okay, and that most of the evil that we do, or the evil things about us, flows from and stems from the bad stuff that we think about all the time, the stuff we think and dwell on. We had good desires to start with, but those are tweaked and broken now. The next thing the Flying Spaghetti Monster talks about is judging people based on how they look, or based on if they're male or female. He says samey unless we're talking about fashion, right? But the Bible is able to be coherent, because it says that both man and female were created in the image of God, not one necessarily more than the other. So since they both inherently have the image of God, or they're made in that image, they both have the same amount of value and honor. So now we're going to talk about money. All right, so there's a bunch of stuff that could be said about Jesus and money, but I want to focus in on two stories here that I think will highlight well for us where Jesus would agree with Henderson and where Jesus might disagree. So the first story is in Jerusalem, okay? So Jesus rolls into the temple, and he looks around, and he notices everybody's buying and selling stuff. When he's like, this place is supposed to be like a house of prayer for all nations. This ain't no TJ Maxx up in here. Dude starts flipping tables and cracking a whip. All right, so I paraphrase the story just a little bit, but you get the point. So the next story I want to bring up is the story about the two small copper coins. Here's the setting. Jesus and his disciples there sitting in a synagogue, probably participating in worship. And it comes to the point in the service where people walk up and give their tithes and offerings. And you've got some working class people in front of them, and in front of this old lady, and they go in and they put their money in the box. And then you've got this old widow, and this whole time Jesus is watching them. So this old widow, she has these two small copper coins, and she basically has the choice to make, am I going to give this to be used in ministry, or am I going to eat today? And she makes the first choice. She goes in and quietly puts it in and keeps moving. And then Jesus looks around to his disciples, and he's like, you want to know how to do it? That's how giving is done. The reason I bring this story up is because I think the emphasis here that Jesus is getting at is that it's not the size of the gift that matters. It's the fact that the gift is there and is done in love, and a lot of times a sacrifice. So Henderson talks about the size of churches. Now, I'm not going to give a limit on how big or small a church should be, but there is a point I want to make that there is plenty of good and plenty of bad things that may come with having a big church, just like there's plenty of good and bad about having a big family. But having a big church does enable the church to be able to meet certain needs. And sure, there are tons of abuse of money in church, but there's also a lot of really good things that big churches are doing to meet some serious needs in communities all over the world. Oh, and about lowering the cost of cable. Thank goodness for Hulu and Netflix. That's all I got to say.